Adjourned. Let's welcome our candidates for the Hanover Republican Committee Attorney General Candidates Forum. So, if you didn't know, I'm Russ Wright, I'm the chairman of the Hanover Republican Committee. The goal of this forum is to help you get to know the candidates and to help the candidates get their message out. It's kind of a win-win situation. And this is for the sake of making the best decision when it comes to selecting our nominee. So, here tonight, running for Attorney General are Chuck Smith, who is over there. Hey, Mr. Smith. And we have John Adams, who is also over there with Mr. Smith. Tonight we're running a forum format, so the Executive Committee of the Hanover Republican Committee selected questions that each candidate will have 2 minutes to answer. The order of the questioning will rotate which candidate goes first with each question and which candidate goes last. So the person who just finished will go first right away for the next question. We have timekeeper, Mr. Andrew Naggs, who, by the way, is our parliamentarian. So he will hold up a yellow sign. The yellow sign when there are 30 seconds left, and when there are 5 seconds left, he'll hold up the red paddle. Keep that in mind. We don't want to have to bring the enforcer in.
If they go over the time, does he use the paddles?
So far, that hasn't happened. So eggs. Oh, apparently there are eggs in the house. I'm highly concerned about that, but I hear that they're a friendship gift. So.
Yeah, eat more chicken, right?
So next, I'd like to introduce our moderator for the night. She's a member of the Hanover Republican Committee since 1978, by the way, a one-time Hanover school teacher and a previous chairman of the Hanover Republican Committee. Please give a warm welcome to Fran Sadler.
Thank you, Russ. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like for the two, here you are. Good. Gonna ask you to come down. We're going to begin with each candidate having about 5 minutes to make an opening statement to the body. Going first will be John Adams. John Adams was born and raised in Chesterfield County, Virginia. He has a degree in economics from VMI and a law degree from UVA School of Law. At the completion of his service as a U.S. naval officer, John attained clerkships with 2 of the most respected conservative judges in the country. First with Judge David Sentell on the U.S. Court of Appeals in Washington, D.C., and then with Justice Clarence Thomas on the United States Supreme Court. Following his time with Justice Thomas, John worked as an associate White House counsel for President George W. Bush under Fred Fielding, Ronald Reagan's chief White House counsel. John later returned home to the Richmond area to serve as a federal prosecutor in the U.S. Attorney's Office. Today, John is in private practice at McGuire Woods, where he chairs the Government Investigations Department and leads a team of over 60 attorneys worldwide. John and his wife, Lisa, are raising their 4 sons in the same Chesterfield public schools they attended. Please welcome John Adams.
Good evening, everybody. It's good to be with you. Chuck, always fun to be with you.
Absolutely, John.
The last time I was here, we had not had an election yet, and I told you that it had been an incredible experience for me to clerk on the U.S. Supreme Court and to be a lawyer for a president. And I told you that the election was so important because Justice Antonin Scalia had passed away and that the deciding vote on the Supreme Court was at issue in this election. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we did our job.
Yes, we did.
We did our job. We did our job, and last week the President of the United States did his job. And he nominated one of the finest people if you ever get the chance to meet, I will tell you, he nominated one of the finest people and one of the most absolutely true conservative judges in the country to replace Justice Scalia. And that, ladies and gentlemen, was what it was all about. Because that court is now gonna stay on the right track, and it is just a huge victory for conservatives. You heard that I clerked for Judge David Sintel. Neil Gorsuch clerked for Judge Sintel about 8 years before me, and I've met him on several occasions. I know him pretty well. I don't know him great, we're not great friends, but I know him pretty well. And I will tell you this, you can take this to the bank. You're gonna be proud of the Supreme Court Justice that Donald Trump just nominated, and he's gonna be confirmed, and it's gonna be a wonderful thing for the United States. All right, so we did our job in 2016. What do we want to have happen in 2017? All right, this is really simple. I thought it might take a little while to give you an example, but it turns out it didn't. If we don't elect a new Attorney General, everything that President Trump, that the Republican Congress, that our Republican friends here in Richmond do, will be challenged with a lawsuit by you. Raise your hand if you're not aware that you have sued Donald Trump. Does everybody know that? You've done it. Not just do it, you've done it. Because your Attorney General used his authority to sue in the name of the Commonwealth of Virginia. So, it's politics, so nobody lets you use their names. So I won't use the name. But a former Republican Attorney General of Virginia called me. He said, John, you need to know something. In this election, the governors will take all of the oxygen out of the room. That's all anybody's going to care about. Well, I would like to, with all respect to my friends who are all running for governor, tell you this. If we elect a Republican governor, but Mark Herring stays in office, he will foul it up so bad. He will foul it up so bad. I will submit to you the Attorney General's race is just as important as the governor's race. You got to have the governor to stop vetoing all the laws that our good delegates are passing, and you got to, it's true, isn't it?
He got one of mine last year, he'll probably get one this year.
Right. How fundamentally different would the Commonwealth be if, what did he do, 37 vetoes last year? Something like that?
Something like that.
Right? Our Commonwealth would be fundamentally different if we had a Republican governor. But even if you elect a governor, and you don't elect an Attorney General, trust me, everything you think is good, he will sue to stop it. He'll tie it up, just like he already has. It is amazing to me that for 3 years he could not get into court to defend the laws you, the people of Virginia, have passed. But when Donald Trump does something, he sure does become a litigator, doesn't he? It's pretty amazing. So I've met, I think, almost all of you before. I am not a politician. I have never run for any office before in my life. I have spent my life dedicated to defending the Constitution. After VMI, I took an oath to be a United States Naval Officer, to defend the Constitution of the United States. I did my duty. I got out, I went to law school at UVA. I took an oath when I was with Judge Sintel. I took an oath when I was with Justice Thomas, and I took an oath at the White House. I've spent my life as a lawyer defending the Constitution and the ability of the people to govern themselves the way they see fit. I was a federal prosecutor right here in this area, my hometown, born and raised in Chesterfield, prosecutor in the Eastern District of Virginia. I know how to be a prosecutor. And for the last 6 years, I've helped run one of the most successful law firms in the country. And though nobody talks about it, the simple fact of the matter is, the Attorney General's office is a law firm. It is your law firm. It is the law firm of the Commonwealth of Virginia, and it is not being run properly. So I will just make this pledge to you tonight. I have dedicated myself to the law. I don't have a political career. I don't care about a political career. We have a problem in Virginia. I'm running only because of 2 things. Mark Herring. That's it. How arrogant is he to think he knows better than you? You pass a law and he says, I disagree, so I'm not going to defend it. You pass a law and he refuses to defend it. I'll always defend your laws. God bless each and every one of you. Thank you for coming out tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Adams. Our second candidate is Chuck Smith. Chuck is a local attorney who has practiced law for more than 36 years in federal, military, and state courts, representing people from all walks of life. His current focus is constitutional law, criminal, divorce, immigration, and military law. A U.S. Marine and a U.S. Navy JAG commander, retired, Chuck is married with 5 children. He has lived in Virginia for the last 3 decades, in Roanoke, Norfolk, and Virginia Beach. Just 4 days after being released from Marine Corps active duty, Chuck was accepted at the North Carolina Central University, where he graduated in just 6 years with 2 degrees, a BA in political science and a JD in law. And nearly 3 years later, Chuck received a presidential commission to the prestigious U.S. Navy JAG Corps, where he served both active and reserve duty for 20 more years until his retirement. As a Navy JAG, Chuck served as a prosecutor, defense counsel, administrative discharge officer, and held the prestigious position of Special Assistant United States Attorney. Chuck has been an ardent defender of the Constitution and American values. His focus, morals, values, and principles reflects his continuing sense of duty and his determination to make Virginia a better place for us all. Please welcome Chuck.
Good evening. Good evening. I have to tell you, John's not going to like this, but he walks into the room and he says, "Oh, Chuck, there you are. I've been looking for you." How is he looking for me in this crowd? He can't find me. Mr. Chairman, members, it's certainly an honor to be here. It's an honor to travel around Virginia, get to know Virginians, get the word out. You've heard I've done some pretty amazing things. They are amazing. But that's not what I'm going to talk to you about tonight. I'm going to echo something that John said. We don't get this Attorney General out of office. We're in bad shape. We won't recognize the Second Amendment in 4 years if he's not gone. So I want to tell you that this is not trial and error. This is not time to become 0-8. We are 0-7 in statewide elections. We need to give Virginia somebody, anybody, who Virginia will never forget. We need to give Virginia someone who stands out amongst the entire crowd. No offense, John. But somebody kills me that you can see coming a mile away. And I know what you're thinking. Yes, let's give Virginia a Marine. Let's give Virginia someone who enlisted in the Marine Corps in 1970 when everyone else was running away. Let's give Virginia a Navy JAG. You're right, a Navy JAG commander who retired after 26 years of combined military service. Active, inactive, and reserve. Let's give Virginia a lawyer that's practiced law so long, it's been 37 years already. Let's give Virginia the former chairman of the largest Republican Party in Virginia, City Committee, Virginia Beach. Let's give Virginia not just someone who practices immigration law, but someone who's fluent in a language other than English. Let's give Virginia someone who has dedicated his life to the Republican Party. Let's give Virginia someone who says what he does and does what he says. Let's give Virginia someone that when we go to the polls, he will be able to attract votes in those areas where our candidates have traditionally lost. Someone who will be able to communicate with all Virginians and tell them about the good things that Virginia's done and the better things that Virginia's going to do under his leadership. We need an Attorney General. What we don't need are more laws. We need to enforce the laws we've got. What we don't need are refugees, Muslims, and mosques running around our country until we protect the citizens we've got. What we don't need are grown men and boys trying to use what's clearly marked the girls' bathroom, and we definitely don't need more unidentified radical Muslim terrorists running around our country. We need to get our Constitution back. I ask you, going forward, how are we going to shape this and make this really what it should be and what it is? Let me just tell you something so we'll get this off the record. I say this everywhere I go. The last thing we need is an African-American Attorney General. We don't need a white Attorney General. We don't need a black Attorney General. We don't need an Asian or Hispanic Attorney General. We need an American Attorney General. And I'll tell you this, I have never been to Africa. I'm not going to Africa. I haven't bought anything in Africa. I was not born in Africa. I was born in Greensboro, North Carolina on July 4th. That's Independence Day. That makes me an American citizen. I'm running to be your American Attorney General. God bless you all. Thank you.
question and answer time. And I have 8 questions here, and if we have time for more, I have some additional ones as well. Each candidate will have a 2-minute opportunity to answer the question. We're going to start with Mr. Adams first. The first question concerns a legislative agenda. It is customary for every AG administration to have a legislative agenda. If elected, what will be the key features of your legislative agenda? Provide details, including the initiatives you would pursue, current laws you would seek to amend, and your priorities in the public, safety, and criminal areas.
Great, thank you. So the first thing I have to say is, Chuck and I have been together for a long time. And I'll tell you, Navy guys, we always take abuse from the Marines, you know?
As you should.
Oh, arrogant. See, it never stops. What would we do if on every third day a 747 crashed into the ground in the United States? What would we do? Killed everybody. We'd figure out what was going on and we'd get on it, right? That's how many people are dying in the United States from heroin and opioid abuse. A 747 every third day. And you cannot run for statewide office in Virginia and not have this issue stand up and smack you in the face. Doesn't matter where you go, doesn't matter who you talk to. It is a crisis that it transcends party, it transcends politics, it transcends race, it transcends economic status. To give you just an example, we went out to Southwest Virginia and we were talking to a group of business leaders, right? We're not even with the sheriff, we're not with the Commonwealth Attorney, we're talking to business leaders. And they're very hopeful that in the Trump administration we're going to start to get some jobs back out in Southwest Virginia. Do you know what their number one concern is? Drugs. The workforce has been decimated by heroin and opioid abuse. So, legislative agenda. The legislative agenda is really the prerogative of your elected representatives. I am very, very cautious of AGs acting like legislators. We have one now and it's wrong. But it's true the Attorney General can put forth an agenda. Number one for me is going to be issues related to how we handle the opioid crisis. There's a couple different ways you do it. One is, do we focus on helping people who are addicted or putting everyone in jail? I can tell you this, you will not find a responsible person in law enforcement that thinks you can arrest your way out of the heroin epidemic. You can't. We have to be smart about how we're going to handle that. So that's one aspect of it. The two other areas where we will seek legislative help, in increasing the role of the Attorney General's office in public corruption at the local level. Public corruption gets a lot of attention on the big stage, but in local politics, it doesn't get enough. And the last thing is a faith-based initiatives program in the Attorney General's office to make sure that our churches and community-based organizations can help tackle these big problems. Thank you.
So, people will tell you there's a lot wrong with our country. There's a lot wrong with the world. I'm here to tell you there's nothing wrong. In fact, the only thing wrong with our country, the only thing wrong with the world is that there are people in it. Many of whom don't believe in anything higher than themselves. Similarly, the only thing wrong with the Constitution is that the very people that take an oath to defend it don't. I firmly believe if we get back to the Constitution, if we enforce our own laws, we have no problems. If we get back to the Constitution, all of our problems will go away. I believe as Attorney General, first on the board is public safety and security of Virginians. Second on the board is to make sure that law enforcement has the tools that it needs to do the things that it does to protect us, to protect Virginians. But we also have to get back to the Constitution. We need someone who believes that the Constitution as written is what governs this country. The last thing we need are activist judges. The last thing we need is an activist Attorney General who will decide for himself that he's going to pick and choose from the Constitution only parts of it that he will protect, obey, and defend, while we, the people, are subject to all of it. I'm telling you, and I'll say this again, if we want somebody to defend the Constitution, we need to look no further than a Marine, someone who has done that, who has stood up for that. We need to look no further than someone who served in the Navy JAG Corps, but certainly we need to look to someone who is going to protect Virginians where they are. I want to make sure that the Constitution, first and foremost, is what we look to. And everyone on my staff will commit themselves to enforcing and obeying and following the Constitution. That's the word that we're going to get out. That's what I think will make us whole again, and that's what will get us back to the country that has been founded, called the United States of America. Thank you.
Chuck, why don't you just stand? You're on first for the second
I'm
question.
first. Who's on second?
Mr. Adams. And I'm at home. The second question concerns challenging federal law. A former Attorney General Cuccinelli drew criticism for expending state resources to challenge a federal law, Obamacare. What is your position on challenging federal law? If in support, what criteria would you use to determine whether to proceed with such a challenge in the future? Are there any laws you would challenge on the first day of your term?
We are not the lapdogs of wayward federal policy. Can everyone hear me in the back? No? Yes? Good. Okay. There is a part of our Constitution, the 10th Amendment, you all know what it says, that all power, not specifically delegated to the federal government, nor prohibited by it to the states, belong to who? The states and to the people. We need an Attorney General who will protect Virginia. We need an Attorney General who would look at that 10th Amendment and say, no, Mr. President, or no, you will not put refugees in Virginia ahead of securing the security of Virginians. We need an Attorney General who's going to stand up for Virginia, not just stand up for the good old boy policies of the past. Historically, our attorneys general would position themselves in office only to run for the next office. We need an Attorney General who's going to be Attorney General. Who is the Attorney General if no one enforces the Constitution? We need an Attorney General. I intend to be that Attorney General, and I, in turn, intend to defend the citizens of Virginia. Thank you.
I view the role of the Attorney General as defending the sovereignty of the Commonwealth of Virginia. If you want to know what I'll think every morning when I get up, I'm going to get up in the morning and defend the sovereignty of the Commonwealth of Virginia. What does that mean? It comes down to two key things. Number one is to defend the laws you, the people of the Commonwealth of Virginia, through your elected representatives, have passed. As I always say, men and women have died so we can govern ourselves the way we see fit. Government serves us, we don't serve it. So that process breaks down when the current Attorney General, even though you have decided how to govern yourself, he decides that he disagrees and he's not going to defend the laws you've passed. That's wrong. Job number one is defending your ability to govern yourself the way you see fit. Right with it. Job number two is to stand on the south shore of the Potomac River and punch Washington in the jaw every time it unconstitutionally encroaches on our sovereignty. That's it. That's how you defend the sovereignty. You all govern yourselves the way you see fit, and we keep Washington at bay. I'll give you an excellent example. There are 28, now 29 Republican attorneys general in America. 22 of them banded together and sued to stop the Clean Power Plan because it was unconstitutional, overreach by the executive. Guess what happened? Anybody know what happened? They won. We won. We won, but we didn't win because Virginia didn't join that lawsuit. When I'm your Attorney General, I won't join the lawsuit, I'll lead the lawsuit. So yes, the whole purpose of fighting against federal overreach is one of the core duties of the Attorney General. One of the things we've done in this country is we've lost this idea of federalism because the federal government has become so powerful. One of the ways you get that back is you have attorneys general who stand up for state sovereignty. That is one of the core reasons I'm running for this office, and I'll do it all the time. You mentioned in your question that Ken got in trouble. Some people complained because he expended resources fighting against Obamacare. Ladies and gentlemen, there was a state law passed. He was defending the will of the people. The people, through their elected representatives, said, stand up and fight, and he did, and that was the right thing to do.
Mr. King, why don't we stand there?
Oh, yeah, okay.
You're first up on question
All right.
3. The next question concerns ethics and conflicts of interest. Do you have any specific guidelines or a personal code of ethics that you would apply in determining whether a conflict of interest may exist while performing your duties as Attorney General? For example, if a former client, business associate, or personal friend or family member was involved in matters of governance under your control.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I'm a lawyer in the Commonwealth of Virginia. I know everybody's got their favorite lawyer jokes. You'd be amazed how often on the campaign trail people go, I don't know if I want to vote for you, you know, lawyers. We got too many lawyers. I'm like, I'm running to be the Attorney General. Have to be a lawyer. And they're like, then I guess I'll let it pass. But I'm actually proud to be a lawyer. I think it's an incredibly important job. As a lawyer in the Commonwealth of Virginia, I am specifically governed by the rules of professional conduct by the Virginia State Bar. They're serious rules, and they have rules that are very applicable to lawyers in government service, and they cover all of the things in the example. If you have friends, if you have former clients, all of that's covered. In addition, there are statutes that specifically cover what the Attorney General can accept in terms of gifts, how those are reported, all of this stuff. Let me bottom line it for you though. Like all those rules, I'm a rule follower. You heard my background. I'm clearly a rule follower. That's like what I do. But forget the rules. One of the problems we have in this country is people have lost their faith in government. And that is not good. Okay? Because if we go much further down the road of people not having faith in government, we're going to have real problems in our hand. So for me, the test goes beyond following the rules, and it goes to even the appearance of impropriety. Right? I can't do anything in office that you would look at and even think, that just doesn't look right. Why is he weighing in on that? Or why is he dealing with this case involving his wife's best friend, right? So my commitment to you is this. I will never embarrass you as your Attorney General. I will stay clear of anything like that because the office is more important than I am, right? The office is bigger than I am. It's more important than I am. It'll be there long after I'm gone. And you have to treat the office with that amount of respect. Thank you.
If it looks like a duck, walks like a duck, talks like a duck, doggone it, it's a duck. We need people in the office who are going to do the right thing. If it gives the appearance of any type of shady business, then that person needs to step down. We don't need to go forward taking 3 or 4 steps backwards. You don't need a long discussion for me about this. Not just, as John has indicated, are we attorneys and we're bound by a code of ethics, but for Virginia, for you, we're not going to put ourselves in a position. Chuck Smith will not put himself in a position. The Attorney General should not put himself in a position where you even have to question whether or not it's right or wrong. Again, if it looks bad, we should be out of it. And that's the philosophy outside of the canon of ethics that I intend to follow. This is not a job where we get in just because we look good. No offense, John. This is a job that's hard work. This is a job which is dedication. This is a job which represents Virginians. And I have been in positions all of my life where I've represented other people, most of my life. I mean, even as a kid, little Chucky growing up as a kid, I used to sometimes take my neighbors and we used to go to the park and I'm responsible for bringing them back. Now that's maybe a little bit too far back to go, but you know, I'll tell you that you begin at home, you begin early, you begin in another environment to learn what's right and what's wrong. And if you live by that, people rarely have an opportunity to question your ethics and your principles. I intend to continue that faith in representing you as your Attorney General. Thank you.
Why don't you stay?
We'll get it.
You're first up. You're first up. Question 4 concerns same-sex marriage. The 2015 U.S. Supreme Court ruling on same-sex marriage did not legalize same-sex marriage, but rather it held that provisions banning same-sex marriage are illegal. The ban on same-sex marriage is still in the Virginia Constitution. Did the Supreme Court ruling automatically invalidate this provision, or is a repeal process required within the General Assembly to remove this section of the Virginia Constitution? Would you please explain?
no repeal is necessary. I think the question is correctly phrased, correctly asked. The Supreme Court did not say that all same-sex marriages are valid. They simply said that the ban that you all structured, that you came up with, is just inappropriately structured. It's unconstitutional. So therefore, that does not mean that we should go into the Virginia Constitution where the people of Virginia established in their Constitution that marriage is between a man and a woman and change that. All that means is that we need to get better at the structure of whatever the prohibition is going to be. Now, I'll tell you this. We did not come to marriage of two people of the same sex by intention, by design. If you recall, there was such a thing called civil unions, that two people who were of the same sex wanted to pass property back and forth to themselves. And at some point, when that was rejected, then this mushroom cloud, which came up in a short span of time, called marriage between the persons of the same sex, came into fruition. That's how we got that process. What I'm saying by giving you this little bit of history that you already know is that this is not my position and my stance on marriage being between a man and a woman at one time is consistent, I believe, not just with my Christian faith, but it's consistent with the Virginia Constitution. But that is not an antagonistic position some of our friends in the gay community may want to ride with and say, oh, here comes this Attorney General, and he is totally against. If people want to provide their property or their money or their finances to people that they share a relationship with, I have no problem with that. The problem I do have is changing the definition for all people, all times, always. God gave us, in my opinion, the bodies that we have. And it's that definition that this Attorney General will ride with. Thank you.
Yeah, Chuck's correct about the repeal process is not a necessary part of it. I want to just talk a little bit more about that decision because if you haven't done it, I mean, you all will love this if you haven't done it. The decision is called Obergefell, and you should go. It'll be powerful. If you haven't done it, read Justice Scalia's dissent in the case, and then read Justice Thomas's dissent. And it's clear what they did was they divided and conquered. They knew that they were going to lose, and so Justice Scalia took sort of the classic legal approach, and he dissented based on the law. And Justice Thomas took the philosophical approach, and he dissented on that. And it's an amazing set of opinions to read. And basically, what Justice Scalia said, and this is 1,000% right, is I don't care what you think about gay marriage. I don't care what you think. The court just ripped democracy out of the hands of the American people. They ripped democracy out of the hands of the American people. 3 states had decided to define marriage to include same-sex marriages in their states. I can't remember now, it's been so long. 21 states had decided not to. There were debates going on in the states. This is Justice Scalia's opinion. He said, the American people were doing what the American people are so good at. They were debating these issues. They were passing laws, remember? So they can govern themselves the way they see fit. And right in the middle of it, the Supreme Court stepped in on a basis that, by the way, I'll just tell you this, I know you know this, no basis in the Constitution to do it. They stepped in and they ripped that decision out of the hands of the American people. At the end of the day, that's the grievous harm of the decision, is it ripped the decision out of your hands, and 9 people you've never elected and you can't unelect made that decision for you. That's why we needed Trump to win. That's why we needed Gorsuch on the Supreme Court. I'm just going right here. This runs a tight ship.
The 5th question concerns sanctuary cities. Very timely. Would you, as Attorney General or Governor one day, support President Trump's executive order removing federal money to sanctuary cities, including those located in Virginia, such as Chesterfield, Arlington, and now Richmond? If not, why not? And would you recommend any other course of action?
When you have, I always say that there are certain pillars that are the foundation of our country. One of them is the first freedoms, those freedoms contained in the First Amendment to the Constitution: freedom of religion, freedom of speech, freedom of press, freedom of assembly. The other is the free market system, and the other is the rule of law, okay? The rule of law is so fragile, and so few of our fellow citizens really understand this. The concept of a sanctuary city, okay? So the concept of a city in the United States making a determination that in this city we are not going to follow a law because we don't agree with it. That is incredibly corrosive to the whole rule of law. Because if you're not going to follow that law, what other laws are you not going to follow? Who decides? Who gets to decide what rules we follow? Because the whole concept of the rule of law, there's a lot of laws I don't like. I know I can drive safe at 72 miles an hour, even though these guys are telling me it's 65, right? But at the end of the day, if you tolerate certain jurisdictions outright saying we are just not going to follow this law, then you are seeing the beginning of the end of ordered society. So the answer to the question is, if you show me a city that is saying we are not going to follow the immigration laws, then I would absolutely support pulling federal funding from them. You can't do that. You cannot do that, or you will watch this civil society we have erode so quickly, it'll just go away.
You know, John keeps passing me every time I go back, as if to say, got you. I know what he's doing. I know what he's doing. The INA, the Immigration Nationalization Act, which defines the circumstances upon which people can enter the United States and not enter, sets up a set of circumstances. One of them being, if you have a visa, you can come to the United States. Another being, if you are a green card holder, you can come to the United States. Now, you can't leave under certain conditions, but you can come and remain in the United States. The visa will only allow you to stay in the United States 6 months at a time, depending on the visa. You can have work visas. But those are the circumstances upon which you can come. Here's the deal. People enter the United States in violation of all of that, and then they want to stay. And not only that, they have others that just want to pluck down in a city and have someone put a cloak around them and say, who cares what the INA says? Who cares what the laws of the United States are? We are going to remain here. You know, the example is someone walking into your home saying, oh gosh, I like it here. Who cares what the owner says? We're going to stay. No, that doesn't happen. Sanctuary cities, by definition, are a violation of federal law. Everyone in that who is not a green card holder, visa holder, or citizen, everyone in that is someone who is illegal in the United States. How do you get to stay in my home and you don't have permission to be there? You didn't have permission to enter. This concept of sanctuary cities suggests that we are going to be a lawless society. How can we be a lawless society? I'll tell you, not that this is totally relevant, but I meant to tell you before, I've been on the Trump team, I've been a Trump supporter from day one. But the point is, the idea that Trump brought, are we a nation or are we not? Do we have laws or do we not? You send your sons and daughters or fathers to law school and they study all this law, then they come back home and people say, we're going to have sanctuary cities. How do you get there? We need to change that. We need to enforce our laws. And this does not mean that we are racist. This does not mean that we are antagonistic. All it means is that there is a door to come here. Come through it. That's what we suggest that people do.
The next question concerns Article 10, Constitutional Convention. 5. I'm sorry. I forgot my Roman numerals. Do you support or oppose the Article 5 Constitutional Convention proposal currently in the General Assembly? And explain your reasoning.
So here you go. You got this great marriage. Wonderful marriage. Everything is going along fine. Then the wife comes along one day and says, hey, let's just nullify this one. You know, she didn't want to be married, really. Let's nullify this one, and we're going to start up a new one. And you're thinking, if I go along with that, and we nullify the one we have, and she doesn't decide to go into the new one, I'm stuck. Well, just think of the Constitution in that sense. We have a great Constitution. It has spanned, is that the word? My mother was an English school teacher. Is it spanned or spawned? I don't know. It has lasted for a very, very long time. Nations and countries have fallen. Their constitutions have fallen, but ours, the United States of America, our Constitution has stood the test of time. Do we want to tinker with that? Now, I'm all in favor of a constitutional amendment to fix some things, you know, like people getting in office and they really don't want to leave their homesteading. We should maybe plug that hole. But if you open up Pandora's box, what will happen? Some of the freedoms that we enjoy, some of the things that we have may disappear. Evil and corruption and deceitful people will, believe me, just race to that opening and try to infiltrate it with germs and all those things that could possibly destroy our Constitution. My answer to you is yes, I'm in favor of an Article 5 convention. However, I'm not in favor if we cannot secure the singular purpose to the singular result. Because I promise you, there are evil people in the world, as we know. You open it up, and people will try to do things more than what is being suggested, or what was the original intent. Thank you.
I love this question, and I know we're stuck to 2 minutes. 2 minutes there's not 2 minutes enough to do this. This is an issue that conservatives will divide on, and some are really passionate about it on both sides. I actually didn't know what Chuck's position was. I think we almost agree. I am not in favor of a constitutional convention right now. I've spent my life with the Constitution, done it at the Supreme Court with Justice Thomas. I've spent my life with it. Here's my concern, and it goes sort of to what Chuck said. A lot of people will say, oh, we can control the Constitutional Convention. And my answer is, don't just say it, let's talk about it. And when you strip it all down, I only got 2 minutes, I've stripped it down. When you strip it down, once you convene a Constitutional Convention, that convention can make whatever recommendations it wants. That's the way it's gonna be, okay? That's the way it's gonna be. Again, a wonderful tool the founders gave us for when time comes to pull the ripcord is now the time. I don't know, I got George Soros pumping money in because he wants us to have one. That should always send up a red flag. Yeah. I'll tell you my biggest concern is the Second Amendment. So, but a constitutional convention only recommends, right? That's what a convention does. It recommends to the states amendments that then have to be ratified. Fair enough, good point, valid point. When did we last ratify an amendment to the Constitution?
90s?
Yep, the 1990s. When was that amendment submitted to the states for ratification?
1789.
1789 with the Bill of Rights. So can you imagine we get an amendment that's gonna, here's what they wanna do, by the way, they wanna add 4 words to the Second Amendment. That's what they wanna do, just 4 words, just 4 words, right? In the time of war, okay? So everybody says nobody's gonna, we won't ratify that, but then that amendment sits out there and it sits out there and there's a school shooting in Nebraska. And then they ratify it. And then it sits out there and it sits out there and another state has something. My biggest concern is the Second Amendment. And I gotta tell you right now, I think we need to, Chuck said it earlier, it's absolutely true. We gotta enforce the Constitution we have. We need people of character to live by the Constitution and we're gonna be all right. Thank you.
The next question concerns financial transparency in public colleges. While continuing to raise tuition, it was recently discovered that the University of Virginia had a $2.2 billion strategic investment fund. Despite efforts by the legislature, state auditor, Virginia State Police, and State Inspector General, UVA has continued to refuse to disclose the fund's origin, management, or uses. What is your position on requiring publicly funded institutions of higher education to disclose such information, whether under the Freedom of Information Act or some other means? And will you advocate for disclosure of a public college's financial information as a condition of receiving state funds in the future?
This is an easy question, right? The answer is, of course, we want our public institutions to comply with all of these transparency rules, right? I mean, this one strikes me as a little bit of a softball. Our colleges in Virginia they're some of our best treasures, right? There's a lot of things that make Virginia great. One is we have an incredible higher ed system. But how in the world can we as Virginians and public universities, and the folks in the General Assembly in particular, how can they monitor to ensure those universities are living up to their end of the bargain if they don't have a clear window into what's going on? So absolutely, you need transparency, and you need to have access for our members of the House of Delegates and the Senate to understand exactly what's going on in those institutions. That strikes me as an absolute no-brainer. And when people, and this goes back to the ethics question, when people have a public trust, right? They got to stop thinking about themselves, and they got to start thinking about the office they hold and the people they serve, right? And that's true for our public institutions. You will not find a more devoted VMI graduate in your life than me. And I serve on the foundation board, and we raise money for VMI. We're a private institution that raises money for VMI. But once we hand VMI the money, once we as the private institution supporting VMI hand the money, if they want to know where that money is, if they want to know where that money came from and what it's going to be used for, they, and they're your representatives, have a right to know. We have to have transparency in government, folks. It's our government, right? It serves us, we don't serve it. That's it.
You know, sometimes lawyers talk just to hear themselves talk. Easy answer, we could give you something short. I'm not talking about you, I'm just talking about lawyers in general. I'm not going to take a long time with this one. This is a very easy question. Disclosure is important. How can Virginia, to maintain its educational system and provide for its students, assess how much money needs to go to that university or how much it needs to do for that university unless they disclose the additional funds or the additional assets that it has? Thank you.
The next question concerns financial transparency with the Virginia Economic Development Fund. Is there a legal remedy to recover taxpayer money lost through the current Governor's Economic Development Fund, which was given to several failed Chinese companies, including one that didn't actually exist?
Well, maybe you're not going to like this answer. I know the governor won't. We assign responsibilities to people who do some stupid stuff all our life and throughout many areas of our life. If a governor or anyone in his office or his fund deliberately sends Virginia money to a non-existent organization, someone in the governor's office or the fund should be held responsible. That's the short answer. You cannot have what is considered gross negligence and escape culpability. So my answer is, and I'll repeat it, the brevity of the lawyer is always important, but you cannot escape culpability by taking your money and giving it to organizations that do not exist or organizations that you have not vetted properly. You must do your responsibility. I would hold the governor liable, I would hold the fund liable, or I would hold the responsible individual liable. And it really doesn't matter to me whether that person is a Republican or a Democrat. This is your money. As Attorney General, I have an obligation to the people. I have an obligation to you, not to the governor. Thank you.
Yeah, Chuck, I'm not going to say much beyond that because Chuck, pretty much laid it out for you. The answer is there's a pretty high burden there, but if someone was truly being intentional in doing that behavior, no one should live above the law, right? But it brings up an even better question, right? Which is, what do we expect our government to do? Right? I'm a free market guy. So how much do we want government in the free market? I think what we want is government out of the free market to make it more free and let businesses and enterprises come to Virginia and grow and develop organically. right? The more we involve these incentives and the more we involve the government picking winners and losers and here's how we're gonna do it, we're gonna give a tax break to this company or we're gonna do this or do that. Why don't you lower the tax burden on everybody? Why don't you decrease the regulations so some Virginia small businesses can thrive? So we don't have to import businesses, but we can actually grow businesses in Virginia. All of this, by the way, is really the business of the legislature and the governor. But just because that issue came up, I wanted to hit on it. Again, the free market works. The free market works. And the more government interference you have in the free market, the more your radar should start to go off, then maybe things aren't going as efficiently as they should be. Oh, yeah.
The next question concerned Sharia law. Is there any constitutional route for elements of Sharia law to be incorporated within or set up outside the provisions of the Virginia and U.S. Constitution?
Another easy one, no. The whole idea of a theocratic law, of Sharia law, is antithetical to our entire founding and all of the core principles in the Constitution. Right? And that's pretty basic stuff. So you'll see Justice Thomas is great on this. If you have another fun set of opinions to read, when justices start comparing the United States laws to other laws, he loves to make fun of them. Because he's like, there's all these countries out there, and you always pick the countries that agree with you. He's like, let's pick some countries that don't agree with you. And you would be amazed at some of the laws on the book in China and in some of these third world countries. It's the only way we, the people, can govern ourselves if we live by the laws, the supreme written law of the land. That's the Constitution. Totally antithetical to the idea of a theocratic law. It's just completely, fundamentally, diametrically opposed.
I got to tell you that this is true. I was born on the 4th of July. My office is on Independence Boulevard. And I live on State Street.
My name's John Adams.
I knew he'd never come back.
Hold on. Oh, well, I'm not done. The real John Adams, the president, was born on the 4th of July.
He was. That's true. That's true.
I say that because I've got Americanism running through my veins, I believe. I don't know why Mama decided to have me on the 4th of July, but there's no place for the laws of another country to come into my land. There's no place for the laws of another country to even think about supplanting the United States Constitution. No brainer.
Russ, have you run out of time?
Have you run out of questions?
The questions that you had highlighted, yes.
Okay, did you still have questions that we supplied to the candidates?
Yes.
Are the candidates open for more questions?
Sure. Yes.
Okay.
Is the audience open for more questions?
Hey, we want to hear you. We have 13 minutes in the schedule, so
Okay.
Good.
please continue.
All right. How about natural resources, namely uranium? Do you support or oppose uranium mining in Virginia and give reasons for or against?
Do you remember who was up? Chuck? Okay.
I am in favor of any alternative resource that directly benefits Virginians, except when there is a risk to Virginia, risk of safety. If the extraction and the use of uranium can be had without risk that outweigh the benefits, or without risk of harm to Virginians, then I'm in favor of that. I think not only would it create jobs, but it would create opportunities I think so vitally needed in Virginia.
Yeah, I'm a property rights guy. My first instinct is for property rights, and you go back through the history of common law, and we say in the United States, you're entitled to the use of your property. But we've always in our society had an exception, right? You can do whatever you want on your property, but like you can't detonate a nuclear bomb on it, right? So you can use your property until the risk of using your property gets so potentially harmful to your neighbors that then we say you can't do it. I'll just tell you this. This is for people who are a lot smarter than me. I've looked at it. Everything I can tell says there's a pretty serious risk from uranium mining to the water supply in Virginia Beach. But I'm not an engineer. At VMI, my roommates were engineers and they worked a lot harder than I did. I was in economics. You gotta trust experts on that, and that's why it is, that clearly falls to me in the sort of legislative part of the government, right? So my gut instinct is always to maximize the use of private property by the property's owners for whatever they want to do on it. It's their property. But there's that difficult balance when it starts to look like the use of that property could really hurt your neighbors. And again, I'm not an expert, I'm not an engineer, but what I've read makes it sound like there is probably a risk to the downstream water supply, and that's the water supply that supplies Virginia Beach. And so, you know, I trust smart people to make good decisions, and I think that's going to work itself out here in the coming months and years.
All right, John, let's try one more.
Oh, yeah.
The topic, utility companies in Virginia. 2 years ago, the General Assembly granted special protection to power companies to eliminate reviews, but allowed utilities to seek permission to raise rates. The Virginia Supreme Court will be taking up the case this month to roll back this benefit. Former Attorney General Cuccinelli and Miller, a Democrat, have recently filed briefs supporting removing this special protection for electric utilities like Dominion and Appalachian Power, the two companies that supply virtually all electricity in the state. Do you agree or disagree that this kind of rate protection should be removed? Why or why not?
Yeah, good question, and I have to confess I've not read the Cuccinelli-Miller brief yet because I've been out on the road. This question is one where you divide, right, between policy and law. Two questions, policy and law. Is it a good policy to exempt the power companies from review? The guys and gals in the legislature, they're gonna make that decision. If you're asking John Adams for his opinion, I don't really like the idea of not keeping a review on people. That's like my gut reaction. That's a policy choice that they're gonna have to make. On the legal side, it's a much more interesting question, right? Is it unconstitutional? And one of the things we've done in this country that is a problem is we have constitutionalized everything. Any dispute you have, it's a constitutional problem. And that is a bad thing to do. Because the Constitution, both Virginia's and the United States Constitution, is a precious document. And what it does, the Constitution doesn't provide the answer for every question. That's your job, you're the people. The Constitution limits government's power to keep us free. And it sets up the rules by which governments are gonna govern themselves. I have not thoroughly analyzed it. To me, this is a policy question. Is it unconstitutional for our elected representatives to make a decision over the regulatory state? I sure hope not. Because we elect the representatives. And the regulatory state scares me to death. At least we can hold him accountable, right?
Yeah, buddy.
We can hold Buddy accountable, right? But I can't hold the deputy director of water at DEQ accountable. His paycheck comes somewhere else. I don't vote for him. I want power in the legislature. I want power in the legislature because I can hold them accountable. So that's my sense on the constitutionality of it.
I hear someone rooting John. Let me tell you, I take the opposite view of that. I disagree completely. How do we have a system anywhere that escapes review? If there is no review, how can we determine the cost of goods and services provided? If there is no review, how can we determine whether the consumers, us, the people, are getting what they, if they're, gentleman said he couldn't hear me. I'm a little hoarse, you may have said on the campaign trail. If there's no review, how can we determine that the cost of goods and services are being provided adequately? If there's no review, how can we determine that the rates are appropriate. How does any utility company, I just won't pick on Dominion and I have no stock in that company, but how does any utility escape review by the General Assembly? Of course there should be review. Because if we don't have a process by which we can assess what is being done, how will we know what has been done? And where our money, where our assets, where our resources should be divided? We must have accountability. We must have transparency. This is not just go pick on Appalachian or go pick on Dominion. We're talking about Virginia. That's the type of Attorney General I'm going to be. We don't do favorites. We don't do special people. We're all subject to one law. We're all subject to one Constitution. And if we divide it, if we segment it on the question of constitutionality, why would we want to go down that slippery slope just to get review from a utility company that's providing services to Virginians? Of course we need accountability, and of course we need review. That's my take. Thank you.
I think Chuck may have, what I was saying is I actually think we do need review and accountability, but I think that's on the legislature. I don't think what you don't do is you don't say it's unconstitutional for the legislature to make a decision like that. Because what you're doing is you're empowering the regulatory government. If you say it's unconstitutional for them to make decisions about the level of review from the regulatory state, you're empowering the regulatory state. But as a policy matter, I agree. Yeah, you gotta know what the cost of goods and services is. I agree. You have one more?
Chuck, would you join us up here?
John. Yeah, I was going to say, John was the only candidate at the time who called me on my birthday to wish me happy birthday. Having said that, I hope he loses.
I only called him because it's easy to remember. It's the 4th of July.
We want to thank both of you gentlemen for being here with us tonight. Please add these gentlemen to your prayer list, as well as all of our other candidates, for their safety as they travel throughout the state in their quest to represent us. I worked at the Attorney General's office for a few years. I was the director of the law library until it was discontinued with budget cuts. And it was interesting. One of the older gentlemen who was on my floor, we would talk occasionally. He said that he had served there under a number of attorney generals from both parties. And he said that Mary Sue Terry was the worst one he ever worked for, and that Jim Gilmore was the best. So we hope that whichever one of these candidates is successful, they will be the best as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Chuck.
Yeah,
Thank you,
you bet. Thank
John.
you.
So another big hand for our candidates. And whoever we send to the Attorney Generalship, we will be proud of our candidate. So thank you, gentlemen. And last, a big hand for Fran. Thank you, Fran Sadler. All right, this concludes our Attorney General's forum. Thank you all for visiting, and thank you for Mr. Andrew Naggs for being our timekeeper.
Hell, yeah.